I hereby call to order the Roseville City Council meeting for Monday, August 19th, 2024. Can the folks in the room hear me all right? Not getting it.
That's not a-
Okay, it doesn't
that's a
sound like the
mixed
PA
bag.
is on in the room quite loud enough, but hopefully we can get that. Oh, that sounds better.
Better.
All right, very good. We got that out of the way early. With that, Mr. Trudgeon, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Etten?
Here.
Councilmember Groff?
Here.
Councilmember Strawn?
Here.
Councilmember Schroeder?
Here.
Mayor Rowe?
Here. And with us at the dais, we have our guest city attorney tonight, Siobhan Toller, from our attorney firm, filling in for Rachel, who's out this week. We also have Pat Trudgeon, our city manager, as I mentioned, on the other end of the dais. And other staff and guests will participate as the meeting items come up on the agenda, and we'll make those introductions then. With that, I'd also want to remind folks, if you have a cell phone, to silence it or otherwise assure that it doesn't disrupt the meeting tonight. We do have meeting materials for people who are attending the meeting this evening available on the table under the clock in the back of the room. We have a number of copies of the agenda for folks to have for their own use. Hopefully we've got enough. And then also one copy of all of the meeting materials in a three-ring binder, which is the public copy available for your consultation if you need to see any of the meeting materials this evening. I believe from a housekeeping point of view, we'll talk more about public comment as those opportunities come up. But otherwise, we'll ask folks to stand if you're able for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next on our agenda this evening is to consider approving tonight's agenda, and as always, I'll check with Mr. City Manager Trudgeon to see if there are any changes that need to be made from a staff perspective to the agenda this evening.
There is not, Mr. Mayor.
All right, and I'll check with council members. Are there any changes council members would like to make to the agenda this evening, or items council members would like removed from the consent agenda for separate consideration? Does not appear to be the case. We'll also do a quick check-in with the audience. I had mentioned the consent agenda. That is at the bottom of the agenda, section 10 this evening. It's 10A through E in this case. It's approval of our payments. There's a massage therapy establishment license, general purchases over $10,000, an agreement with Reach for Resources, as well as a resolution about outdoor storage of fleet vehicles on Highway 36. If any of those items are items that you're here for this evening and you wish to either ask a question or make a comment, this would be the opportunity to let us know, and we can pull that item off the consent and move it earlier in the meeting so that you don't have to stay to the very end to make your comment or ask your question. Is there anyone here for an item in section 10 of tonight's agenda? Does not appear to be the case. In that case, we have our agenda as presented. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Strawn, second by Councilmember Ratten. Sorry.
That's a,
All right, we've got our motion before us to approve the agenda as presented. Is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. We have our agenda for this evening. Next on tonight's agenda is the first opportunity for public comment. This is an opportunity for general public comment. We will have an opportunity for folks to speak to items that are on the agenda as those items come up. But at the beginning of each meeting, we do want to provide an opportunity for members of the public to speak to their city council, their elected representatives, about items either related to city business, but not on tonight's agenda, or items of interest to people in the community that are also not on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone here to speak this evening under general public comment on non-agenda items? Yes. If that's the case, I'll go through the process and then you'll know exactly what to do. So we'll have an opportunity for folks to speak. And when you do speak at public comment, we've got the two microphones at the table. You can have a seat at one of the chairs in front of the microphone. You don't have to adjust the microphone or anything. Each speaker has, by council rule, a 3-minute time limit to speak. And we ask that you address comments or questions to the city council. We may, under general comments, we may not be able to answer the particular comment or question at this time, but we'll certainly, if it's something we need to refer to staff or something along those lines, we'll make sure and do that. With that, the other thing we would just note is when you begin your comments, if you can state your name and either your address or your street name for the record. And we'll ask folks to come forward who wish to make general public comment at this time.
Hi,
Hello, welcome.
my name is Dean Sabetti, 2016 Beacon Street here in Roseville. And I would like to address, like, they got a really nice evergreen park here in Roseville that they've done up for pickleball, and the park looks nice now, and it's really popular for us aging people. And during the state fair, they post no parking signs for the fair there, but people just kind of ignore it and go through. I was wondering if there's a way we could maybe get that more enforced somehow.
I can respond to that this evening.
Oh, okay.
So generally speaking, we do designate some of those areas as no parking because of our experience with parking around some of those park and ride lots. And we partner with the state fair to make sure that that's all, obviously, that they're covering everything associated with the park and rides. But we've actually also had an agreement with them, I think, for several years now, that they cover the cost of additional enforcement. And so we want to make sure if you are having issues with parking in that area, you can either call 911 and say it's not an emergency and just report the location, and Roseville will go out and enforce, or you can call the non-emergency dispatch number as well in those instances and make sure and report it, because that's the only way we know to enforce it is when it's reported.
Right, yep, thank you, because that's what we tried last year, and it didn't seem to, they said they couldn't do nothing because it wasn't city, we weren't city employees or whatever, so they kind of were,
We'll
So-
check into that.
Yeah,
So-
and if I could just say, we have an extra officer on duty during state fair time that's off duty, that is specifically charged to enforce the parking issues there. So I would urge you to contact dispatch again, and
Okay.
we'll send somebody out.
thank you very much.
Thank you for bringing that to folks' attention.
That was easy, thanks.
We like those. I hope.
Now that you've had one experience, you can feel free to come back for more public comment at all of our meetings if you like. All right. With that, is there anyone else who wishes to speak during general public comment this evening? All right, seeing no one then, we'll go ahead and proceed with the rest of our agenda this evening. Next on the agenda, we have some recognitions and donations. And the first couple of things are proclamations, which I will read, and then the council will have a motion to consider approving. The first is in relation to Hispanic Heritage Month, and the proclamation reads as follows. Whereas from September 15th through October 15th, National Hispanic Heritage Month is observed to celebrate the heritage, history, traditions, and cultural diversity of Hispanic Americans, whose heritage is rooted in Spain, Mexico, Central and South America, and the Caribbean, including Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, Colombia, Venezuela, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Paraguay, Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Dominican Republic. And whereas the national observation began in 1968 as Hispanic Heritage Week and was expanded in 1988 when the United States Congress adopted a resolution designating that period each year as National Hispanic Heritage Month. And whereas this Heritage Month is celebrated mid-September to mid-October to highlight the independence of several countries. September 15th is the day that 5 Latin American countries celebrate their independence from Spain, those being Costa Rica, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Guatemala, and Honduras. Mexico also celebrates its independence on September 16th, and Chile on September 18th. Whereas the Hispanic community has had a profound influence on our country through their strong commitment to family, faith, and culture, and they have enhanced and shaped our national heritage with centuries-old traditions that reflect the multi-ethnic and multicultural customs of their community. And whereas during National Hispanic Heritage Month, the United States celebrates the culture and traditions of Spanish-speaking residents who trace their roots to Spain, Mexico, Central America, South America, and the Caribbean. And whereas the City of Roseville invites all members of the community to celebrate 2024 Hispanic Heritage Month with the theme, Pioneers of Change, Shaping the Future Together. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City of Roseville hereby proclaims September 15th through October 15th to be Hispanic Heritage Month in the City of Roseville.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Etten, seconded by Councilmember Strawn to adopt that proclamation. Discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. That proclamation is adopted, and I'll note that it'll be published in Spanish as well. The second proclamation this evening is related to Constitution Week in Roseville, and it reads as follows. Whereas September 17th, 2024 marks the 237th anniversary of the drafting of the United States Constitution by the Constitutional Convention, and whereas it is fitting and proper to accord official recognition to this magnificent document and its memorable anniversary, and to the patriotic celebrations which will commemorate the occasion, and whereas Public Law 915 guarantees the issuing of a proclamation each year by the President of the United States designating September 17th through 23rd as Constitution Week, now therefore be resolved that the City of Roseville hereby declares September 17th through 23rd to be Constitution Week in Roseville, and urges all to reaffirm the ideals the framers of the Constitution had in 1787 by vigilantly protecting the freedoms guaranteed to us through this guardian of our liberties, remembering that lost rights may never be regained.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Groff, seconded by Councilmember Schroeder. Discussion on that motion?
No.
Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. That proclamation is approved. And then third, under recognitions and donations, we have recognition of our community relations team as a result of some awards that have been received. And we'll turn it over to our Assistant City Manager, Rebecca Olson, to introduce this item for us this evening. Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Mayor, Council members. Tonight, we're very excited to share with you some awards that our Community Relations team won. These awards are called the Northern Light Awards, and they were issued by the Minnesota Association of Government Communicators. I'm actually going to turn it over to our team because they're the ones that did the work. I want them to share with you. So I'm going to invite Corey Yunke up, and Shannon and Ian, if you'd like to come up as well.
Welcome to the team.
Right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Take a second to load up this slide here. You know which one? We didn't get an award for this one. And let's see here. What's that? Slideshow. All right, gotcha. Sorry there. Close enough? All right. So with me today is Ian Wallish, Community Relations Specialist, and Shannon Prather, our Community Relations Coordinator. The three of us make our Community Relations team, though these awards involved a lot of folks in our city, not just us. And so as I'd like to thank our Assistant City Manager for giving us a chance to talk up here for a second here. We'll kind of just do a brief summary of each award. 3 awards, 2 first place, 1 silver award. The first place that we received was with our website redesign. A couple of the notes that the judges gave us for this was a lot of for all 3 of the awards was the intentionality, the purpose, the thought that we had, and we put into a lot of these awards, a lot of these efforts for the awards. Ian was very integral with the website redesign. I'd like to take credit for it, but it was a lot of time spent with design. And shortly before or after coming over to this side of City Hall, the admin side from the police department, we worked really hard to get Google Analytics set up. It seems easy to do of just signing up, but we had a lot of work to do to get that fixed. We used that information to really lead the design, to see how our site was used, and really to identify some opportunities. One of the opportunities that I think was really big was giving Parks and Rec their own celebrated site. We found out that our website is largely used by park users, participants, people in their programs, and we have a very, kind of complex department there working with all of our nature programs, all of the parks, facilities, the rentals, the oval, all of those things. So we put a lot of time into that to make sure people can get there and make a better user experience for those. The accessibility was brought up as well, of some intentionality again with that, of looking backwards as well, of trying to get all of our graphic links to be able to work in readers as well. We use the add-on UserWay, which we'll talk a little bit more in our newsletter coming up, but that little icon is in the upper right of our website that allows people to use a lot of different functions to have more access to our website. And yeah, I'd say finally, the biggest thing that judges mentioned was our the news flash options on the bottom of our websites, where Shannon and Ian put a lot of time and effort into articles and trying to inform our residents of the programs and services we offer. We celebrate those a lot more, and those are kind of our launching point from where we put all of our social, all the links, all the QR codes that we go drive back to those that drive back to our website and push people further into our website for more information. So having that really celebrated at the bottom with bigger, easier to see, it's more aesthetic in general. Hopefully you guys notice that. And just the work behind it that you won't see are hundreds of pages, thousands of images, so many broken links, a lot of things that nobody's going to understand unless you're just dealing with it. And so still, a website's never really done. It's always in redesign pretty much. And so as you see things, please let us know. We'll continue going. But great job on Ian for that one. The other first place we received was for a special event for Envision Roseville Family Day. I don't know if folks remember that, but it was a kind of a dual program that we did to celebrate our 75th anniversary of Roseville. But this one came to us, again, the intentionality was based off that Envision Roseville program that we were missing some key feedback from our community. Some of that was with our younger families, and we're always looking to hear more from our BIPOC community. And so we were, again, really intentional with this. With no budget, we tried to find ways that's going to bring families to our parks. Having worked in the police side, I knew that they had some unused money for the family day that I used to help run, and so I'd like to say I stole that, but I'd like to say borrowed it to the police department. And so we used that to bring things that families like, so free stuff, a petting zoo, the face painting, inflatables, our public safety vehicles that we can get out there. And we were very intentional where we put that. Our consultants is right by that line, that kind of waiting line where parents have nothing they can do but listen to our consultants talk about aspirations and pull out information. And so we were very intentional with that, and we had almost 700 people attend that event again. And so in addition to that, the second part was to kind of tee up some people for the 75th anniversary event after that. One side note I'll say on that, the efforts again that people didn't see, is there was a huge storm that canceled that. Everybody was gone except for Ian and I with a wagon pulling up all sorts of signs underneath the power lines in Central Park during a lightning storm. And so I can say that now because we're safe. I wouldn't say that for insurance purposes. And so, again, that event was recognized, and there's a lot of people saying that's a smart way of doing that versus just putting an event together. We really thought this out. And finally, a silver award for a public information project we did, and this was largely Shannon's efforts and Ian's efforts with the photos there. But it's a series of articles that we put together, including an article about the MAC, about the Letters Instead, Ticket Innovation, Innovative Practices, an article about the Duxbury incident in South Owasso, introduction to Tom Pitzel. What else am I missing from that? Most of those put together. And again, these are tough topics. These aren't always easy things to put into, and also hard to get these published sometimes. Shannon's a phenomenal journalist and isn't just a great at piecing together articles, but and making people feel comfortable of saying things that I couldn't pull from people, others can't from it. And really not just that, getting this stuff published in earned media. So this wasn't just our in-house publishing. This was put together and echoed by the Pioneer Press, the Star Tribune, industry, as far as the Police Chief magazine. Yep, of that, and also used in presentations for different things for this of doing it. So these departments, the police department are there for policing of it, and so it's not easy for them to kind of put this stuff together. Where Shannon made that very easy and got these messages heard and read by a lot of folks that wouldn't be just through our website or through social. So these were recognized by our peers, and not the first time we've been asked for some of these pointers, and we do the same thing. We rely on our peers as well to get these ideas. But as I mentioned at the beginning, this wasn't just us three. This was the community members giving us the time to talk about it, staff giving us time, department heads giving us access to their employees, and overall it's a big team effort. As I say a team, and I speak for everybody here. So, anything else to add?
Covered it.
Yeah. Any questions?
Any questions from the council? Councilmember Groff?
It's not really a question, but I see a huge difference in our communications since I came on the council. And this summer, what I've really experienced, or I really appreciate, this award reflects it, these awards reflect it, of course, but I have heard over and over again people who know your names out in the public and say specifically what you've been doing and how great it is for the city. And I actually had someone say, how did you get Shannon up to Roseville? And I'm like, I really don't have the answer to that. They're like very impressed and very jealous of it. So those are just feedback I'm hearing from the community, and it's all been very positive.
Thank you.
Others? Councilmember Schroeder.
Yes, thank you and congratulations for the awards. That's great. Ever since I've been involved with the city as well, the one thing, I remember the first time I applied for a commission, the first question was, how can you improve communications, you know? And I was on the Finance Commission, and they were even asking us that question. So that, I want to echo with, Member Groff here, sorry, Council Member Groff. I keep getting the EDA and this.
Yes.
I too have heard a lot from people about how much it's improved, and one of the things was, I know everyone kept thinking, how can we improve it? And obviously, you have come up with great ways to improve it, and not just talk about that we need it, but you actually have come up with ways to achieve it. So thank you very much.
Councilmember Strawn.
Thank you. I want to echo the others' comments, but I also want to appreciate the team that you've created, Corey, Mr. Yunke, because you were kind of the point person to start this out. I have seen Ian many places this summer, and I appreciate again just that consistent face in the crowd that people know. But I thank you for being forward-looking. I've had many people who are disability advocates with concerns about the readability of our website, and as we hear over and over and over again, why can't we have a paper? We know that that's not necessarily the future of communications, but really appreciate where you're taking that and moving it forward, and still understanding that people want those stories and people want that type of feel. So I really I appreciate you from the community for what they see. We're hearing more and more how much people find that value in the publication that you're getting to them. And I think before it used to just kind of be, look at, chuck it in the recycle. And now I definitely go through it all. And there's almost always something I didn't know. And I would think that I would have a lot more information. And so I appreciate the effort and time that you put into that. So thank you.
I feel like I better say something new. They're not gonna like me.
Likewise.
They're gonna write some news article.
About the one
Retiring council member never worked anyway. Or I'll say, thinking about the website, I know in those months of transition, there were several times I said, Corey, what's up with this page? Or you guys did a tremendous job of peeling apart all kinds of layers of crazy that was on the internet and making it clean and much more accessible for everyone. So thank you for that work.
There was a bad haircut phase for that. We were working it out. So, yeah.
That's a good way to describe it. And I would just echo the notes on the newsletter, and I think that just kind of is a great opportunity to maybe preview, not specifically, but I know the notion is that you're not resting on your laurels, and that this isn't the end of the things that will be creatively done. We've already looked at adjusting things like the timing of the State of the City and some format aspects of that, and some other things. And so I think that one of the things I really appreciate about this group is just the constant interest in improvement and innovation. And the challenge, of course, becomes is that you have to balance that with getting the job done every day too. So we appreciate also that you keep that in mind as well. So, but we look forward to the next innovations that'll be coming out, and the next awards you'll be recognized for those innovations. Congratulations.
Thank you. Pressure's on.
Yeah.
All right. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
With that, then we can move to our business items this evening. Our first business item is to receive an update in relation to the proposed opportunity to put in place a Green to Go ordinance. And we have Noah Bakken with us this evening, our sustainability coordinator, specialist.
Always.
Sustainability go-to
Every
person,
time.
to give us an update on this and talk about maybe some next steps.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor Rowe and all the council members. I will try to get through this quickly. I tested it today, and my presentation clocked in at about 30 minutes, and I know we're about 10 minutes behind now, and that's pretty typical when you're following Corey. But
Oh, he's already gone.
we all love Corey and the communications team. I wanted to echo all of that. But today we're going to do a pretty quick history of the discussion, just kind of briefly talk through how long we've been talking about this, talk through the why of why we're looking at implementing an ordinance for this type of thing, And then we'll go through an overview of our engagement process. We'll talk through some of the survey results that we heard. And then we'll go through some implementation and enforcement recommendations. I put question and discussion at the end, but if you have questions as we go through, please feel free to interrupt me. Otherwise, you don't need to listen to me talk on and on for an hour, half an hour. So we'll get started. We've been discussing this at least I've been discussing this since March 2022. I think it was in a little bit of consideration even prior to that, but when I came on board, the Public Works Commission implemented this, and we started doing some research and a couple of detailed presentations to the commission, and then we finally went to council in January to talk about our engagement process recommendations. We received authorization to move ahead with community engagement, and that engagement involved a survey which we launched in March. We did also send a letter to Roseville businesses that are licensed by the Ramsey County Environmental Health, held a couple of community meetings, sent a second letter out in June, and then we did some additional engagement in August, just reaching out to the different BIPOC chambers of commerce. There's a Black, Hispanic, and Hmong Chamber of Commerce all across the metro, so we reached out to make sure that they were aware of this as well. We are introducing this because we primarily wanted to reduce the use of expanded polystyrene, more commonly known as styrofoam, in the food service business, as well as to reduce PFAS in the waste stream. Something like this would also support the Pollution Control Agency's solid waste plan. It sets forth a goal of municipalities reaching a 75% recycling rate by 2030, which is drawing ever closer. We only have 6 years. As of 2020, we're at about 46%, so Roseville has a ways to go. This also aligns very nicely with Ramsey and Washington County's food scraps pickup program, which has been rolling out to a few communities across Ramsey and Washington County. Roseville is expected to receive it around 2026. We also recently this year, the Packaging Waste and Cost Reduction Act was passed in the 2023 legislature. Among other things, this would require all packaging coming into Minnesota to be recyclable or compostable by 2032. So this aligns very nicely with that. And it also adds consistency with nearby communities who've already implemented some ordinances like this. And then finally, reducing waste is really important on both a local scale and a global scale. And I mention this because recycling markets shift over time. Our current hauler tries to keep all of our materials mostly in the Midwest and Minnesota and almost entirely within North America, but some recycling does get shipped out to communities in the global South to deal with, and especially China for a long time. And then when they stopped accepting plastics, it went to Southeast Asia after 2018. So our recycling might not necessarily even stay in our city or our county, and so that's important to think about when we're thinking about reducing waste. And why we're looking at this specifically for food, and this is something that I mentioned when I had a presentation with the businesses, and there's two major solid waste issues that we see. One is plastic pollution and the increased prevalence of microplastics in the environment, and another one is food waste, which is a huge issue in the United States. Food and packaging make up almost 45% of materials in landfills. Plastic production is at an all-time high and continues to grow. Even though plastic's been in production since 50s, 60s, the 50% of all plastic ever made has been made since in the last 18 years, which is a pretty astounding thing to think about. And it's projected to rise. From a food standpoint, and this is something that I heard from Minnesota Hospitality, rates of ordering food for takeout and delivery more than doubled during the pandemic, and 20 to 30% of businesses' revenues come from takeout and delivery services. Additionally, food waste is a massive issue. 4 to 10% of food purchased by food service businesses is actually wasted before it even reaches the customer. And then overall, we waste about 30% of our whole food supply. So by composting those food waste scraps and maybe diverting them to a different waste stream, we can turn it into a useful material. Compost can amend soil and make it healthier. I wanted to talk through the equity considerations of this ordinance specifically. One big thing is when you think about businesses owned by minorities, people of color, a lot of times that presents in lower earnings, less growth, lower access to loans and credit and that sort of thing. So one thing I really recommend throughout this whole process is if we move forward with this, and even if we don't, it's really important that the staff works really closely with businesses to make sure they're aware of different programs and technical assistance that's available for them. Additionally, the survey was only offered online and in English, so that puts a lot of bias on respondees who only spoke English and had access to the internet. And then additionally, a survey does say that low-income households are more likely to use delivery services compared to higher-income households. So if restaurants respond to this by raising their prices, it could adversely affect those households who rely on the takeout to eat from day to day. And again, race and income are very closely linked, so BIPOC households are very likely to be affected if that were to come to pass. Once we received the go-ahead to start doing outreach, we created a landing page on the city website. This page, this is a screenshot of the page. It included links to the business and resident surveys, what our basic goals were with the ordinance, what we're proposing, links to our brochure and past presentation information if they wanted to look through that, links to other cities' ordinances so they could see what other cities are proposing, and then links to some of those businesses that can help offset some of the costs that would come along with this process. As I mentioned, we met early with Hospitality Minnesota to talk through our ordinance proposal and our engagement process to get some ideas from them, and got some good feedback on when a good time to have public meetings would be and how best to reach some of these businesses. We sent out informational letters in March and June to all of the licensed food businesses in Roseville, letting them know about the proposal and the ordinance language and the other ways they could get involved. The 2 online surveys that we created have been open since March. They remain open still at this time. We held 2 in-person listening sessions that included staff from Visit Roseville, the Twin Cities North Chamber of Commerce, Ramsey County, and also several packaging suppliers and distributors. And here I just want to comment how Visit Roseville and the Twin Cities North Chamber have been really great partners throughout this whole process and extremely helpful with trying to get us connected with some of these businesses. We did do in-person outreach as well in the last couple of months to try to let businesses know about some of these meetings and how they can access the survey and access some of these resources from Biz Recycling. And then we also reached out to some of the professional organizations just to let them know and spread the word a little bit further to places like Minnesota Grocers, Minnesota Retailers, Minnesota Food Trucks, et cetera. If you can think of a business, there's probably an organization that represents them. So they also helped get our information out in the public a little bit more. Any questions before we move into survey analysis? All right, keep it moving. So we had 19 total responses out of 142 unique businesses. So we have about 180 licensed food entities in Roseville, but that includes a bunch of chains. So if we break that down to just single locations, and actually we received one other response just since I posted this, so we actually have 20 responses, which instead of 13% now represents 14%. Which it was maybe lower than we were hoping, but I was very pleased to get we got some really good feedback, and we'll go through some of that now. Some trends that we saw, really cost is by far the biggest issue that a lot of people were very concerned about compared to some of the materials that they were already using to pivot to something recyclable or compostable. I also noted that a lot of respondents were not familiar with Biz Recycling resources, so I think that was a huge area of opportunity for us to just do additional outreach to let them know that that is a really great resource that they can help with. We put a few different items that we could do as a city to help through the transition process and ask them to rank them. By far the highest ranking option was getting connected with suppliers and funding resources. And we also asked a few questions just about general operations to understand things like what do they know about their current hauling situation, how do they get their materials, and how much material do they tend to keep on hand. And so almost overwhelmingly, everyone keeps less than 3 months on hand, which means that at least from a changeover perspective, there's not a whole lot of waiting time to get through some of those materials, aside from the cost. Some notable themes from comments that we received through the survey too. We heard a lot of comments about the lack of control of the packaging once it leaves their hands. So once the consumer gets it, the restaurant can't really control how it gets thrown away. There are some ways we can try to offset that by requiring, the correct types of receptacles in those businesses, but if they're getting it to go, it's kind of hard to really control that.
I have a question just on that.
Yeah.
It came to me as I was thinking about this earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any correlation between the types of containers and packaging we might want people to use in terms of recyclable specifically, and the things that are accepted in our residential recycling program. I just wondered if packaging is over here and the things we accept in our residential program are here, or is there good correlation
It's
there?
the
Because
same.
that's probably where things might end up.
Yeah, in the ordinance language, we actually have, the recycled materials have to be accepted by our local hauler, so
Okay.
that was part of it.
Good.
Because we didn't want any confusion, any more confusion than there already is.
Right, I mean, it's still a challenge to get people necessarily to recycle in their households, but at least we're accepting the things that we're asking people to use, so that's a step in the right direction, it seems like.
Correct. Councilmember Strawn?
In that same vein, are any of the proposed materials things that could go into these compost?
So it would require anything that's either recyclable or compostable. And so as the ordinance is written, if they have compostable materials that they're offering for their to-go materials, they really should include a organics receptacle at front of house that people could use if they need to. So if they offer recyclable, only recyclable and trash, then they don't really necessarily need that organics container. But if they're offering compostable, they really need to have a compostable container for people to use as well.
And just to note, I think it also talks about reusable as well as another option.
Reusable is an
Yeah.
option, yes.
It's not well taken advantage of at this time probably in the industry, but it is.
It's a growing industry. We definitely, and I've reached out to a few of the suppliers that kind of help with exploring those options. We have one local business that I know of that is working with one of those right now that's using those containers. But yeah, there's a lot of complexity with that I think I'm not sure businesses are ready for. But I will say I think there's a lot of opportunities for changing from single-use dining in materials to reusable dining in materials, and there are resources that I mentioned towards the end of the presentation that speak to that. So,
Thanks.
yeah. Anything else before we move ahead? All right. I think we left off, one of the other comments that we received were just about the efficacy of different packaging with different types of foods, which is a common thing you hear, especially with like hot, greasy foods. Things like curries and that sort of thing don't really do well in compostable materials because it starts breaking it down that much faster. And then from a biases standpoint, I mentioned earlier, the survey was online and only in English, so respondents that don't speak English as their first language and don't have access to the internet may have had trouble with accessing the survey. And the majority of the respondents were white. We did ask an optional demographic question, and so by far the most people who responded were white. I just wanted to highlight a few of the questions that we asked just to kind of explore how that looked. One of the things we asked was just what type of business they are, and this was a multi-choice question. So we had a really interesting range of local businesses, local chains, independently owned businesses, and even a couple of national chains and hotels. So we had a really interesting cross-section of the responses that we did receive. And then I also asked how long the business has been open, just to get a temperature check on that. And actually the most respondents we had have been open for 10 or more years, and I think that really speaks to the vitality of our community that we have that many businesses that have been, even just responded to this, that have been open so long. And here's that race and ethnicity question that we asked, and so you can see most of the respondents respond as white. And then the big question, do you support an ordinance requiring takeout containers to be compostable or recyclable? And this graph changed a little bit since we got one more response in just yesterday. We have 6 yeses, 7 maybes, and 7 nos. So very broad swath. I was honestly surprised how many yeses I received, which, you know, somebody who supports this might be more biased to respond to the survey in general anyways, but it is what it is. And then finally, I just wanted to speak to a couple of really key comments that I think encapsulate a lot of the things that we heard throughout this entire process. One person said that the containers are considerably more expensive and sometimes twice the price, and they can be hard to get in a timely manner because sometimes they're special order. And I think the big one on the far right, I would be open to using something sustainable that was more economical than what's currently offered. We've resisted raising our prices throughout the last 4 years as we try to offer our services at an affordable price point, which is very hard to find anymore. And the kicker, cost of goods, taxes, and wages continue to rise, making it hard for small businesses to remain profitable and worth the hard work it takes to operate a small business. I think that really speaks to the heart of what I've been hearing throughout this whole process, is that they're really interested in it, but the cost might be a little bit offsetting. And I know restaurants have had a lot of issues with staffing in the last couple of years and dealing with some other legislative issues that have come up. So we definitely understand that and are hearing that. Residential survey, we received 76 total responses, and I'm not even going to try to say what percentage of the population that is, because it's not statistically significant, but still a good number of people who responded. General trends, just under half of all the respondents actually eat out at least once a week, which I was not expecting it to be that high. And even a quarter of the respondees said that the takeout materials restaurants offer affected where they eat. So some people won't even go to a place that serves their food in styrofoam. A surprising majority would pay a small upcharge if the restaurants offered a fully compostable or recyclable option for takeout. A lot of people said depends how small, which is fair. Again, to note, an upcharge passes that cost on to the consumer and could adversely affect low-income households that are relying on those places to eat. Although a couple suppliers did say that maybe a 5-cent increase per item could offset that cost depending on their volume, so their mileage will vary depending on what materials they're using, honestly. And then overall, 88% of the responses supported the ordinance. Residents were very interested in this idea. Some notable themes we saw from those comments: a lot of concerns about microplastics and different types of non-recyclable plastic, especially black plastic number 5 came up a few times. Concerns about different city and county recycling requirements. So if somebody from Anoka County comes into our area and eats out and then takes it back to Anoka to eat and they can't compost it, we can't. It's another part of that. We can't control what happens to it when it leaves our hands. And then a lot of people mentioned they had a perception that this ordinance is really necessary for restaurants to take action. Whether or not that's accurate is hard to say, but that's the perception that people have. And then to note biases for this one, again, residents who are really passionate about this issue are much more likely to respond to this issue. And I'll talk about some of the things that lead me to believe that in a little bit. And then there's a lot less financial risk for the consumer in this situation. So it's easier for them to say, yeah, let's do it. It's great. So here's that graph that shows just what the responses were for whether or not the takeout materials offered by restaurants affected where someone ate. Surprising that sometimes our yes actually came up as much as it did. And then this is what leads me to believe this is a somewhat biased survey result overall, is that we asked if someone separates their food with food scraps and compostable waste. And so we asked if they take it to our drop site, or if they compost in their backyard, or if they do both, or if they don't do any of them. And a lot of people responded, yes, we do one or the other or both. And I think that's not the majority of people in Roseville. I know there's a lot of people who do compost, but I'm not sure how widespread it is, and it's hard to track that. So it leads me to believe that this is a little bit biased for these results as well.
Just a note on that, it would be interesting to compare that to if there is a comparable question on our survey of residents, if there's any correlation there.
Yep, absolutely. And then I asked where residents lived. So as I was doing outreach throughout the summer on this, I was at various events in both Roseville and St. Paul. And so I was talking to people not necessarily in Roseville, but who also dined out in Roseville because they're also affected by this ordinance. And so most of the respondents do live in Roseville, but there are a handful that responded that either live near Roseville, and the other, I think, is one person who lives in outstate Minnesota but comes to Roseville frequently and wanted to put their vote in for this. So that was interesting. Appreciated their feedback. And then finally, the results of how residents support an ordinance like this, and very overwhelmingly yes from residents. And then I won't read through all of these because there's a lot of comments, but there's a couple that I think speak to what residents are really saying to me. One of them was, everything depends on what people do with the recyclable and compostable containers after getting them, which is a theme that we've talked about. This ambitious effort is useless if the containers are just thrown in the trash. And I hear that loud and clear, and especially talking to the businesses who are going to be affected by this and the costs that they're going to incur, knowing that they're going to have to pay extra and then it just goes in the trash is just a little extra demoralizing, so I can totally understand that. Another person's mentioned if a business wants to add this on their own, that's great, should not be mandatory. And then a third one says, as busy parents, it's difficult to do all we want for the environment, so this kind of program is one we support wholeheartedly. Any other questions before we move on to additional info? All right. So some specific implications for the city of Roseville with this ordinance, if it should pass. Our food-related inspections are done by Ramsey County Environmental Health, and they cannot enforce ordinances on our behalf. So it would be up to us to enforce an ordinance like this. They have been a really great partner in providing contact information for all the licensees in the county, and they will continue to do so. So that's very helpful for us, but it can be confusing if restaurants have to deal with multiple regulatory parties for something like this. Another situation is that food trucks aren't actually inspected by Ramsey County. I think that's a state level inspection. We have a handful of situations where food trucks are present in the city. I did reach out to the Food Truck Association just to let them know about this, but never heard back. But we do work with food trucks on a few different events within the city already on this, so I'm not overly concerned with it. And then caterers, any company that's catering in the city of Roseville for something like a wedding, those would be excluded because they might be located in one place, operate in another place. There were some questions about if a caterer has a brick and mortar shop in Roseville. Those would still be covered under this ordinance. It would just be their catering activities would not be. Some of the benefits that we might see from an ordinance like this, especially from a business perspective, if businesses really do a strong job at diverting their waste to either recycling or compost, they can save a lot of money on their solid waste fees. Ramsey County has one of the highest solid waste taxes in the metro area, maybe even the state. We have a 17% state tax, and the county environmental charge is 53%. Recycling and organics disposal does not get charged the same tax. So if they divert something like their food waste, which is a really heavy amount of trash, it's very and they can go down to a smaller trash dumpster, then they can save money on their trash bill. The next bullet, this is actually a quote straight from Biz Recycling's presentation. Waste is inefficient. A business pays for a product, they pay to collect the product, they pay to dispose of the leftover product, and then they pay a tax on that disposal. So by diverting some of their waste into recycling or compost, they can save their business a lot of money. And even things like moving from single-use dine-in options to reusable can actually save quite a bit of money. So that's something that I think we'll be pushing regardless. And then this is something we heard from a couple of the cities as well that have already implemented this, but businesses that are modeling recycling and organic waste separation at front of house helps to normalize that process for people as well. Edina mentioned that they've noticed that people understand a little bit more how to compost products since they've implemented their ordinance. Just a couple of resources that are available. Biz Recycling and WasteWise we've talked about a lot. If you're not too familiar with them, they offer both technical assistance and also financial support for anything related to business trash. So they can look at your hauler bills, they can help you analyze different hauler options, help you find products, help you get bins for both front of house and back of house, and also covered containers, which a couple of our restaurants have already taken advantage of this. Two other resources. Minimize is one that's also through the chamber. Started with Hennepin County, but they do service businesses across the state. Their focus is primarily just reducing single-use plastic in the restaurant industry, and it's a recognition program, so there's different tiers that you can achieve based on the different actions you're taking. And they also have a rebate to help reduce your plastic usage. And Rethink Disposable is a brand new one. I just heard about it from a resident, actually, and they are funded through the Clean Water Fund and the PCA, and they work with plastic-free restaurants on shifting to reusable serveware for dining in. So there's technical assistance and funding assistance that they can offer, as well as additional mini grants for businesses that are owned by women or BIPOC people. So what we're recommending for the ordinance itself is that we follow similar exemptions that other cities have already put in place. Those exemptions are typically healthcare facilities, licensed caterers, like we've talked about a little bit, foods that come prepackaged by the manufacturer, and anything that's like a plastic film just hasn't something been that the industry has cracked yet for recyclable or compost. As we would move forward, we would work with restaurants to determine if there's other material exemptions that are necessary. Minneapolis and St. Louis Park went through a series of different exemptions as they eased into their process, but the materials are much more widely available than they were back when they started, so hard to say if it's something we would need to do at this point. Our enforcement, I'm recommending just based on annual visits with the restaurants. Just go in, review the ordinance, review their packaging materials. If they're not in compliance, give them 60 days to make changes, and then if those changes aren't made, fine them an administrative fee. And then also create an informational packet for new restaurants so they can understand what we're asking of them, what the ordinance requires, and how they can find support to come into compliance. If approved, I am recommending at least a 12-month phase-in for education and outreach. Part of that would be a packaging fair to help connect businesses with suppliers and haulers and biz recycling and all of that. I actually have a meeting at 8 a.m. tomorrow with St. Paul to talk about their upcoming packaging fair, so we're already working on organizing those for other cities. As I mentioned, observe whether any material exemptions are needed, and then use our recognition program, the Sustainable Steward Program, to recognize any early adopters throughout this process. Post 12 months, recommending annual site visits to restaurants, explain the ordinance, check inventory, check their collection methods and that sort of thing. St. Louis Park is taking this approach. I believe Edina is also. I have already followed St. Louis Park on a couple of their inspections, so I know kind of what they're doing and what it looks like, and I think it's a really common sense way to work with the businesses. And then again, that informational packet for new restaurants. And throughout, as I mentioned earlier, staff really need to connect frequently with businesses to let them know about these technical assistance and grant programs that can help them through the process. From a staffing perspective, we will at least need a summer intern or a graduate fellow to help shoulder the burden of doing all these visits. There's 180 restaurants is a lot. It does include things like schools as well and hotels, which have more limited takeout options as well. But it's still quite a bit of work to go door to door and have those conversations, and so it'd be nice to have a little bit of extra support. And that is all I have. I'd love to hear any other questions anyone has or recommendations.
All right, let's maybe on the council at this point stick to questions or clarifications, because we do want to provide an opportunity to hear from the public as
Yep,
well.
absolutely.
Maybe before we return to council discussion, questions or clarifications from the council. Councilmember Schroeder?
Yes, thank you for doing this, because I know this has been something we've been talking about forever. And a couple of things. It would be nice to be able to find a way to measure this in a meaningful way, because my understanding is the cities that are already attempting this don't have a lot of data yet. Because, from the comments you see, they don't know what happens once it leaves. And so, and I don't know what the answer is, but it would be nice to figure out ways to, what measurements, or how do we know this is working, and is the education getting to the people? Because that a lot of it for the takeout, again, it would be nice to know where it actually is ending up. So it'd be nice to continue to work on the measurement side of that. And then I was concerned about the amount of staff needed for this. 180 restaurants is a lot, and so we'd want to make sure that if we, do this, that we have the ability to follow up, and it's not only just enforcing, but as you said, the educating and helping with these different suppliers and different things like that. So I just want to make sure that you talked about that intern. Is that really going to be enough to do this properly? So, and I know you may not have that answer tonight, but these are just a couple of things I'd like to keep in mind.
And that's an excellent question. And I have one thing I thought of was also, I know community development does a lot of code enforcement as well. I'm not sure if it's something that I feel comfortable passing off to them, or if they would even, I can feel them cringing behind me right now. But it takes a lot of work. Edina has a full-time staff member working on this. St. Louis Park has an entire solid waste staff that works on this as well. Minneapolis has their public health staff that tracks this. From both a staffing and a tracking standpoint, there's a lot of challenges with that, and especially considering the way Roseville is with our population pretty much doubling every day with people coming in and shopping and eating. I think it's hard to track where a lot of that waste goes. But there are metrics that are tracking overall countywide recycling and composting rates, I think that are going to be coming out, especially as those goals become more imminent. And so I'm hoping we can lean on some of those as well as our own kind of internal tracking for, at least tracking how the restaurants are doing and how often we visit them and that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Councilmember Strong.
Can you speak to the statewide initiative you passed over and what the possibility is if that were to pass and what kind of impact that have even if we didn't pass something at our local level?
So that will be a bit of a longer process. The next step for that is the whole bill is called it's EPR, and I'm forgetting what it's basically the producer's responsibility. The producer of these packaging is going to be held responsible for the recycling and waste management of that product from beginning to end. And so right now, as I understand it, the state is creating a advisory group that's going to help formulate what that kind of responsibility is going to look like. They are going to have to pay fees as well to help support some of the recycling infrastructure that's going to be needed for that additional, because there's a lot of packaging that's not recyclable or compostable at this point. So we're going to need to see increased composting, recycling infrastructure for that. But it will affect all packaging that comes into Minnesota by 2032, which is a little further out. But it will affect a lot of businesses all at once it does come into effect. Whereas this is just affecting one segment of businesses that we can do a little bit more concerted outreach effort with them early on and help them access some of those resources that might become a little bit more scarce once it opens up to the general market, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Councilmember Bratton?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, this only deals with containers, not the plastic forks or spoons, right? You had mentioned there was an organization that kind of helps address that, but this ordinance would only be around containers. Is that
It
correct?
would include, silverware would be included in that, so
all right,
to-go
there we are.
silverware. Right now, there's no recyclable option for that, so it would only be compostable.
Okay, thank you.
So, but there's
Great.
also other things like adding straws on demand and that sort of thing, and not including everything automatically with when you order takeout is another thing that we would enforce.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Graff?
How do we handle this if, from the example you used, that something doesn't work there's no container for it yet that works? How do we handle that issue?
We have an exemption language in the ordinance that speaks somewhat to that. I believe it says, I can pull it up here and I can bring it. But it speaks to whether or not there's any kind of, I'll find it right now so I can say exactly what it is. That's the RCA. So, any packaging for which there is not a commercially available or economically practical alternative as is determined by the city. So it leaves
Okay.
it fairly open, but we can talk about things like if there's just nothing else out there, or if there's a significant financial hardship, we can talk about those cases individually and see what makes sense.
Thanks.
All right, Councilmember Strong?
I just wanted to also add, in some of the comments you added, some of the businesses indicated that they would only have access to the recyclable materials from their corporation unless, if we did pass some type of ordinance.
Correct.
So we would have to have an ordinance in place for them to have access to that material from Starbucks or wherever else their national organization was. So, and I was at two different local chains this week who have businesses in Minneapolis or St. Paul, and they already utilize these because it's required where they are also doing business. So, I just wanted to point that out if someone didn't read the minutia on some of the things that you said.
Yeah, it's interesting. Chains, I've heard different experiences in different cities with large chains like that. A couple cities had no problems. It was very smooth to work with them. And then another city received a lot of pushback from some of the larger chains. I have been on a couple of calls with a couple specific larger national chains about this issue as well. And so they're easy to access if we need to, but it is interesting that they would need that ordinance in place before they could actually push those materials out to that community.
Well, I would just say probably it is painting a little bit with the broad brush, just because large chains can have a lot of different characteristics.
And
from
a lot
one
of
to the
different
next to the
ownership
next.
structures too.
Exactly. So that can influence things. So it's hard to even say generally whether all of them need the ordinance in order to get the corporate to release the magic stuff or what. So.
And I've spoken with some
hard
who
to
are
say.
locally owned as well, and so
Yeah.
those franchises would be affected differently than
Right.
like the Starbucks that
Right.
just operate from a regional perspective. So.
So one thing that came to mind in terms of the enforcement side of it is this an opportunity to maybe partner with a neighboring community that's also putting something in place or has something in place that has much more infrastructure in terms of enforcement, where we can pay them a annual fee to do that, as opposed to how that affects our local staffing and ability to pay that way. So just not expecting an answer now, but certainly, hopefully that's something we can have a conversation.
I have a minor answer for that. The cities of Edina, Richfield, and Bloomington have a public health group that they all operate that serves those three communities, and so that could be something we could look into with neighboring communities. And like I said, I'm already working with St. Paul to work with some of their initiatives. As I understand it, they've been pretty severely understaffed for their ordinance, so there hasn't been a lot of enforcement, but I continue to bother them, so.
Sure. That is the challenge, and maybe some revenue from a neighboring city could help that. You never know, but there may be other factors in their staffing issues, as we know with staffing issues generally.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, though. I really like that.
Right. I do want to provide an opportunity for public comment, so if the council can kind of keep thoughts going on this and churning, and we'll open it up for public comment. If there's anyone from the public who wishes to speak to this proposed ordinance, which I want to be clear, we have not noticed it as something we're going to take action on this evening, so there isn't any action to put this ordinance in place this evening. This is just talking about next steps based on everything that we've gotten to this point. Feel free, if there are members of the public who wish to speak to this. Once again, we just ask that you come up and have a seat at the microphone. And we do have that 3-minute time limit, which I'll try to enforce gently and but firmly.
Absolutely. Good evening, Mayor Rowe, members of the council, city staff. John Connolly, president of the Twin Cities North Chamber of Commerce and one of the stakeholders in the Green to Go. And, just our vision is to promote business, develop leaders, and connect communities. And, we're connecting these communities together with the stakeholders and with city staff on some of the implementation of this. We were part of this background and now the assessment process, and now we're getting into some more of the recommendation process here. Just so that you know, she referenced the Minnesota Chamber. We do promote business recycling within our network, so it's always front and center with all of our businesses, new and existing. So just want to make sure everyone wears that. Our solution and positions is that we always want to encourage our members to migrate to this solution. I mean, that's been our position. The thing we wanted to make sure was the context of that is that is it going to cause hardship? If it isn't going to cause hardship for us to do this, give us plenty of runway. Also, ways to minimize costs through innovation. You mentioned something about the packaging. There is going to be some innovation in the next year or two in this packaging world that's going to come up, and we're looking forward to that opportunity to do those sort of things. There's an opportunity for an entrepreneur to create that product. Obviously, we want to make sure that the costs are minimal, or minimized, and we want to be sensitive to any of the sanctions too as well on the businesses, especially some of the smaller ones that, like I said, want that runway and time to adapt to what's going to happen over the next couple of years. So those are just some of the things that I just wanted to reference. And some things are going to be easier than others. The black plastic is going to probably be very quick. Other things like the little half and half creamers that you see that are plastic and things, those are harder. And so just know that it may not be all at once. It might be, but I think some of the incremental things that are going to happen over the next 2-3 years are going to be encouraging, so that by 2030, 2032, hopefully our businesses have enough product and manufacturers that make this product to make it very, very feasible for them. All right?
Thank you.
I do want to say that when I mentioned all the outreach about business recycling, that's not a reflection on the Twin Cities North Chamber. That's a reflection on myself personally. I would say I know our Grow Roseville team also promotes biz recycling quite a bit, but I think it's just a matter of getting in front of the businesses and letting them know that it exists is really the crucial issue. So.
And we're going to continue to be in communication with our members and businesses here locally on this as we make this step in this direction, okay?
Great. Thank you.
All right.
Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak to this item this evening? All right, does not appear to be the case. I want to thank the Twin Cities North Chamber for their work with us on this and their work with us in general. And also just wanted to note that I think it's fair to say, just in my own experience with the business community in Ramsey County, that it isn't entirely surprising that there isn't a lot of uptake yet on biz recycling, because I think it just takes a while for that to be something that a particular business focuses on. So
There's a lot that businesses are focusing on in general and just trying to keep the door open every day. And so I completely understand why that's not their highest priority, to figure out what's out there.
But I can say that the place I work finally did make a connection with biz recycling. We've got new bins and we've got some other
Great.
things going on, so it can happen. I did want to get back maybe to some questions from the council, because I did have a couple. And you talked a little bit about the enforcement. I was thinking about the 60-day period to respond, and maybe talking about how we need to look at how we phase that in over time, and do we talk about sort of when the ordinance finally goes into effect, if we extend that time period out, or some things like that. And that may be a little council discussion too, but I just wanted to kind of throw those topics out there as some things to think about, because and then if it's just one particular packaging item amongst several that a particular business uses and they haven't been able to get it done, do they get the full penalty? Do they get some smaller penalty? Or how do we handle some of those situations too? So those are some thoughts that came to mind, and I'd be curious as to other council thoughts, or if staff has some perspective on those as well.
We did have in our initial draft, I think we had a 30-day turnover period for that, and based on some of the feedback we received, I did extend that out to 60 days, but I think even something like 90 days would be reasonable based on just the cycle of having to order products and learn what's actually appropriate for their food and that sort of thing.
Sure. And I think we want to try to hear more from the businesses about that too, so that we make sure we tailor that to what the reality of the
Yep,
situation is.
yeah, exactly.
Am I correct that that whole system would come in place after a year or so, whatever our decision is, right? So that
Correct.
It wouldn't be if we visited them next month and then we give them 60 days or 90 days. It's
No, absolutely
maybe
not.
a year from now, haven't made the transition or only partially made the transition, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
So it wouldn't be new information.
it shouldn't be new information.
No, it would, basically, the engagement process that we've been doing would kind of amplify even more should this pass, so that we make sure that all of the businesses have ample access to all the information and resources that they need.
Other thoughts from council members as to where we go from here? Councilmember Strawn? Or other questions?
Well, I kind of comments and questions. I think mostly comments. I just think many of our city events currently are zero waste. And we have had a really phenomenal dedicated staff and a really amazing group of volunteers. And I don't know if there's any way we could tap into any of those volunteers in providing opportunities for more of the community to be aware of what they could do, and not just residents and businesses, but I do know there's a few folks I see at every event, and they're really passionate about it, and I applaud them for it. And I know we did a zero waste event at a park building, and it was very successful, and I just know it can be done, and it just takes that extra time to think about it and plan ahead. I do know, as we talk to young families, young adults, young people, there's a very strong interest on environmental impact. So I think for us to say, we're not going to do anything is not where we need to be headed. I think we need to be doing something. What exactly that is, I think there's a combination of things, but it seems like education is just paramount. And that some of that education needs to go back to the business as well, though. If the University of Northwestern said, students don't know how to recycle, well, they have a whole environmental services department. There should maybe be an incentive for them to produce less trash, and so they have an opportunity to see an impact and a benefit for them to educate their students. Students are constantly turning over, 25% or more leave every year. So it's a continual process in a university setting. But I think people have about that much of a brain span, and it's going to be a continual process until it becomes habit for other people too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
And I
it's-
find that doing outreach at events too, I often bring a recycling game where people can, they spin a wheel and they tell me how to recycle or get rid of the item that they land on correctly. And like kids and both adults will just continue to spin and spin and spin because I want to learn about everything on the wheel. And so I think there's a hunger to understand how recycling works. And so I think I agree with you that I think whatever happens, that we do need to do a more concerted outreach effort like Recycling 101 or something with residents to help them understand the process and why it's important.
And the last thing was, I just think, I appreciate adding the possibility of coordinating with another city that might have more infrastructure that we could partner with in some way. But also, I think we have an opportunity as we roll out the compost. We're going to have to be doing a great deal of education at that point too. Does this compost allow bones, or does this one not? And things like that. And then what is it appropriate even for people to be composting in their yard, and how do they do that appropriately? So I think there's a lot of opportunities in the next 2 years to really educate people as these things come out, and I feel like it can all be kind of a group project. And
Absolutely.
infographics are so much better than anything people have to read. Our interactive website would be fabulous, but a game on there. Get the kids on there and they can be working, I don't know, and maybe
Eureka,
some kind of
Our Holler
incentives.
does have a game you can download for your phone that you can do the same thing and test your knowledge. So I recommend checking that out. It's fun. But I agree that would be fun for the city website too.
Yeah, and I sometimes our haulers have a different priority, but I want to make sure that we see it as something that people gain from this, and it's more affordable. You gain the trust of the neighbors and the people who do business in your facility, and even if 50% of those don't go into a receptacle where they are reused, it's 50% more than there was before. And so I think, again, we aren't going to be able to control each and every one of those items, but if we can control even a small portion, it is a cumulative effect.
Absolutely.
Other thoughts, Councilmember Groff?
I agree with all that's said. First of all, though, I did want to thank you for your presentation because this is really, you've done a lot of research, and I really appreciated the contacts you made as far as biz recycling and the other ones. That was educational for me. I was not aware of all those things, and I think part of this push is, in my opinion, the educational part of it.
Oh, absolutely.
Communicating with our businesses, getting that information back to us. This is an ongoing thing. Yes, I hope we eventually pass something here, but it may need to be revisited maybe in 2 years, as Mr. Connolly says, if things start changing and there are other things that come up. So
Absolutely.
I don't see this as something like, okay, we enact it now and then it's done and we're through with this forever. So
It's very much in what they said in grad school, an iterative process.
yes,
So-
yes. So that was the main thing I think is all of those items. I think the educational period needs to be very carefully worked over, and we have to make sure we reach all our restaurants and other services. We need to make sure we reach the people that might have a language barrier. And I know you're working on that, but I want to just bring that up again because I want people to understand what's going on. I want this to be a collaborative thing with the businesses, not a enforcement thing.
I agree.
So I guess that's the gist of my comments. I could go on and on, but that's where I'm at.
No, thank you. That's how I've been trying to push it as well, as more of an educational opportunity rather than something that's just strictly punitive.
And just before I recognize Councilmember Hatton, I did want to note, even for me as a relatively good English speaker, when I'm out and about and I see opportunities to put something in compost or recycling or trash, I still stare at it for about 20 seconds to figure out what I'm supposed to do. So we're definitely not where we need to be just in that regard. And then there's the aspect of multiple languages and things like that.
Yep.
So I think the whole industry and everything associated with recycling and composting and all of that just continues to need to do better to help folks like us figure it out, because it's just such a challenge.
I agree.
Councilmember Haddon.
I would like to thank you also for your work. Obviously, it's very thorough. Appreciate the work you've done to go visit other cities and go on their visits to businesses. It's going to help us do a lot better job, so thank you for that. I brought this up in 2019, and we had a little pandemic, and you came and you helped make it happen. But I understand that maybe that time was good because a lot of things are changing in supply chains, in how we're handling waste, and sometimes things need time. I hear the concerns from businesses and residents, but also hear the support. We've all been to places that have already made this changeover, and they're in business and they're running. We have a business here in the community that actually inspired me to do this. I went there to eat, and I was served on styrofoam stuff just sitting in the restaurant with my friend. And they have, in the intervening 5 years, switched away from that for everything but their cups, and really appreciate that business making those changes. So I feel like this is going to start happening some on its own. When we think about the alignment, you talked a lot about it, but certainly we have the new state law thinking about supply. We have Ramsey County working towards separation of waste streams, getting the organics in line and available here in Roseville and to businesses. So I think it's a great time to be doing this for all of those reasons. We think about some of the education pieces. Are there ways that we can help, even with little stickers, recycle me or things like that that go on them? When you look at a specific business that has certain kinds of cups and things like that, the pictures of their cups, we've all been to places, I don't know, maybe a sports stadium, and they all have the same kind of cup, and they'll have that picture on there.
Yep.
Man, that's a lot easier for our brains, right? So thinking about pictures and thinking about, as we're working with business, helping tailor to the products they are actually using, it will help us all do a better job. I think that thinking about those time frames and thinking about Ramsey County's time frame and things like that, it makes sense for January 2026 as kind of a deadline for this, so it gives a little more than a year by the time we would have the ordinance come back and approve it. At that point, hopefully, more of those systems will be in place. And even if a consumer is throwing away a recyclable thing, Ramsey County's going to be catching that more likely, right? So in the end, we're going to get a lot more success towards our goals and towards our community's goals.
My hope is that by that point, the supply chain might have shifted a little bit more where some of these products are becoming less expensive as
Yeah.
the demand for them continues to grow too.
Yeah.
So.
All right, so council guidance, do we want to bring this back for more discussion of an ordinance at some point? Are there specific items that we want staff to be looking at in the meantime, or questions that we have that need to be answered? Or do we want to kind of table any real further in-depth discussion from this evening to another time to then provide that guidance to staff? We've received a lot tonight. We can do a lot of different things on next steps, and so I guess the question is, what does council think that should look like?
I think we should move ahead.
I read some of the ordinance, but obviously not the part about the plastic utensils.
And I did read that.
Thank you. I noticed you noted that. I'm like, oh, I missed that.
I pointed that out.
But I think we have something fairly robust, something that's been worked through by other cities in practical things. So I think taking maybe some of this feedback and thinking about a timeline, if people agree with the timeline I threw out, that we can come back soon and move
So-
forward with an actual ordinance.
Try to bring back an ordinance before the end of this year so that we have the 1 year
Yes.
implementation time?
I mean, yes.
That's okay. That's what I was trying to get us feel for.
Yep. Maybe next
Because if it
month.
was something different, I wanted to understand that. Councilmember Schroeder.
For me, I want to make sure, though, the education piece is there. Having an ordinance is one thing, but I would want to make sure that we have a system, or I'd like to hear more about how are we going to get hit, because if you look at this, you see, the survey was just in English and it was online, and so how are we going to reach these other people? How are we going to educate to get people ready? I guess I'd really like to see that as the, prequel to making sure that, as we're putting this ordinance in place, that we know we have a plan on how that's going to happen. Because I think that, to me, is going to be the key piece. It's kind of like, again, collaborative, so, and if people aren't part of the process, then it's not collaborative. So we need to figure out a way, and it's the businesses, but we also want to make sure that we know how to roll out the education for the consumers too. So, I mean, that's a piece that I'd really like to make sure we see.
So it sounds like maybe two parallel paths is one towards bringing the ordinance back for our adoption or consideration, and the second is an implementation plan that goes hand in hand with that, so we can talk about what we're going to do during that 12-month period and be fairly specific about several aspects that were brought up by Councilmember Schroeder and others of us this evening. Does that make sense?
That's what I would
Councilmember
agree
Groff?
with, because I see them, it's very important that Councilmember Schroeder to have that, but I don't see that as being in the ordinance. The educational part will be a
Right.
separate issue,
Yeah,
and
it's
we
the
need to address
prequel.
that.
Yes.
But having a plan is the
Yes.
important part of it.
I would suggest that we bring it back same time, both
Right.
the
Yes.
education plan and the ordinance, so you
Right.
can consider
Yes.
that and, same.
Yeah.
I think you can call it an implementation plan, because there's also going to have to be the discussion about how do we enforce it, who does the work, how are we paying for it, and all these types of things too. So there's that piece of it as well as the education side of it.
And I'd also like to know, sorry,
Nope.
didn't get
No,
recognized.
that's right.
I'd also like to know what the enforcement looks like. If, is it, the plan goes into effect January 1st, 2026, but then they have, a 6-month grace period before there's an enforcement. Or we don't know what will happen with Ramsey County, so we would revisit it at that time. But knowing that it's coming in, does that afford some of these businesses an opportunity to start obtaining different materials from their national vendors or, from the national hotel chain or whatever? I mean, maybe it opens some doors that people haven't had access to, but I want to make sure that it's not just about punitive. I really think our goal isn't about trying to recoup some amount of funding, but to really make sure that we're holding people accountable and we provide them adequate opportunities to do the right thing.
And that's why I was recommending a full 12-month
Yeah.
rollout period, really to really take a lot of time to reach those businesses in earnest.
So as I understand it, if it goes into effect on January 1, 2026, that's when people have to have their plans in place and theoretically have their products in use. As to exactly when the enforcement happens after that, I think with 180 businesses, it's not going to happen in the blink of an eye anyway. There's going to be a time frame to do that. And then I think the other piece of it that probably needs to be looked at is, how do we do that enforcement? And, is that 60-day period the right 60, and what is the structure of how we deal with minor infractions versus wholesale ignorance of what we want and things like that. So that's what I'm envisioning part of the plan would be, that we'd be considering at the same time as the ordinance. But the plan would be, from what I understand from Councilman Ratton, that January 1st, 2026 is the date that it is effective for our businesses, and they have the year to do that. And I
Right.
imagine if we put this in place and we get to a point next year and we realize it's not going to work, either we can't get enforcement in place or the businesses can't get, their stuff in place, we could always change that effectiveness date through an ordinance change.
Yeah.
Councilmember Eppen.
I would agree with everything you just said, Mayor. And, if we want to talk about enforcement, sending Noelle in, she's pretty mean and tough. And, I think she's going to approach very thoughtfully, or
Really?
whoever is going to be very thoughtful in how we address this, so.
It's just all about relationship building, and that's, I've already been working with some restaurants and meeting with them one-on-one to talk through some of what they're seeing, what their products are what they're already using, what they would need to do to kind of bring themselves into enforcement. And for purposes of argument, I know Edina enacted their ordinance, I think in 2021, and then or 2022, and then the year later. So it was in place, and then they started enforcement a year later. So that's kind of where that 12-month was inspired from. So.
Well, and I can imagine that may be part of implementation to say, hey, we'll have a temporary committee of some of our local restaurants to help advise the process or something like that too. So,
Absolutely.
all right. Well, I think we got a good set of ideas and plans together and a good basis for an ordinance. And I did provide staff some feedback on the specific potential for a loophole for caterers. So I appreciate that they worked with the attorney to come up with some possibilities there, which can be part of what we talk about at the next time.
Thank
All
you
right.
very much. I appreciate the time.
Thanks, everyone, for all the work on this,
So,
and including the Public Works Environment and Transportation Commission.
absolutely.
They've been great.
Right, we are a little bit behind, but hopefully we can catch up here a little bit. The next item under business items is item 7B, which is to consider authorizing staff to begin a vacation process for excess right-of-way along the north side of South McCarran's Boulevard. And we have our Public Works Director and City Engineer Jesse Freihammer with us this evening to initiate this.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So we've been, over the last 2 years, we've presented numerous vacations of areas. One area we did not have, but we've had numerous issues or concerns that have been brought up that we thought we should bring back to you guys is South McCarran's Boulevard. This is a very unique right-of-way. We're looking to potentially vacate some of the excess right-of-way we have from Roselawn Avenue all the way over to roughly Galtier Street. We're only looking to do the north side, not the south side. The north side is the side we have more issues on. But like I had mentioned, this is a very unique right-of-way. It varies in width, but in some cases it's 99 feet wide, which is very excessive. The typical city right-of-way is 60 or 66 feet, depending if it was a county road or a city, how we acquired it. And then in 2021, with the Enclave development plat, which is just to the east of Galtier, we did vacate excess right-of-way on the south side there, and we retained 33 feet from the center of the existing roadway, which is kind of what we're leaning on keeping if we move forward with this process. One of the other reasons for the need, the excess right-of-way does cause ownership issues with residents. Ownership on boulevards is already confusing to residents, and when we have 40 feet, they don't think they have that. So people put stuff in, it's hard to enforce. There's a lot of existing encroachments. So it's already out there that it's a problem, and once one person has a fence or a retaining wall or other stuff, it builds on each other. And then the city, the biggest need, or the biggest reason we're looking to vacate it, the city has no need for this much right-of-way. It is not needed for any public purpose. In general, 33 feet would meet the needs of the city. For most areas, this would keep about 6 feet behind the existing pathway that is located on the entire north side, so that should cover us. And then we would work, if this moves forward, we would work with our surveyor and staff to confirm that if we need to make any adjustments, maybe we need 40 feet because of some oddball thing, but that's kind of it. So just real quick, I just wanted to just show a couple highlights since I did have a few questions. So the area kind of hatched in red is kind of what would be vacated back to residents, and this was assuming that the 33 feet would stay. So this is near 451 South McCarran's. So this varies. This is probably like 10 to 16 feet. 363 McCarran's, same thing. It starts in the west, about 10 feet would go back, but you get all the way to the east side of their property, and you're probably at 25, 30 feet. And then this is kind of in front of a bunch of homes. Currently, these are a lot of the lakeshore properties. As you can see, there's a lot of existing private encroachments within this, and this is about 20 to 25 feet that would potentially go back to property owners.
And just
And
to
then-
be clear, what you're showing with the red is
What would be vacated. That is
Okay.
the excess right-of-way. So if we vacated, this is what the city would be giving up.
So we'd maintain to the south of the red.
Correct.
Got it, okay, thank you.
And then 257 McCarran's, we discussed this a few months ago, but there's a lot of excess there, but like I said, approximately 6 feet behind the path, so already some existing improvements there. So if the motion is approved tonight, staff would work with a surveyor. We would define the center of South McCarran's Boulevard. That would help us define what we would vacate, so we'd vacate everything theoretically excess of 33 feet from center line. We would set the public hearing and mail notices to the affected residents, and then hold the public hearing. This likely will not occur in the short term. This will probably happen in sometime 2025. And then a 4/5 vote would be required, since this is would be a city-initiated vacation. So with that, tonight, the requested council action is to consider a motion to authorize staff to begin vacation process to vacate excess right-of-way on the north side of South McCarran's Boulevard between Roselawn Avenue and Galtier Street. So with that, I can answer any questions the council may have.
Questions from the council? Councilmember Strong.
Thank you. Mr. Freihammer, can you go back a couple slides there? Nope, the one you were just at. If we were to return the right-of-way, which some people have already sought to return, would those properties or pieces of land that are on the lakeside be available to be sold individually. I know one of them is currently for sale, just the lake access.
Oh, yeah.
Those are currently individually platted lots. This would just make those lots larger.
Okay,
Went to-
so they are not,
They're already owned by property owners.
okay, they're not assumed through from 330 to across the street?
Nope, they're individual. I think some of those are individual lot IDs.
Some of them are through, though.
Some might be through, but some I think are also individual
And
lots.
some are through it, people split them and sold half, or,
Yes.
maybe they had 50 feet and they sold off, so they have 25 they kept and 25 they sold, and there are all
Okay.
kinds of funny ownership situations there.
The
Okay.
vacation process would not
Would
affect
not affect that,
ownership.
yeah.
Okay,
All it would do is give some property that's currently owned by the city back
perfect.
to those properties.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Right. Other questions from the council? Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak to this item? Does not appear to be the case. Sorry, that looked like there were some questions.
I was just going to say that we're sort of approving a small cost for surveying.
Yeah, so we will incur some costs with this. We have on a few other ones, but this one might be a little more
Yeah.
significant than what our typical vacation is, just because we have to define the center line, so we have something to
Exactly.
vacate, so,
On a curved road.
yep.
Councilmember Atten.
I'd like to make a motion to approve this vacation process.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Atten, seconded by Councilmember Groff to initiate the vacation process as
fair enough.
requested. Discussion on the motion as the maker of the motion, Councilmember Atten.
No, I think it just makes a lot of sense, and appreciate the ongoing work that will happen here.
Great. As the seconder, Councilmember Groff.
Yeah, I think this makes a lot of sense. As you said, Mr. Verhammer, the goal of the city is not to own property that we do not really have an intended use for, and it should go back to the owners.
Other discussion on the motion, Councilmember Schroeder.
I know we've been cleaning up this all over the city, so I see this as just another piece of doing this. So I think it's a good idea that we continue to get this cleaned up, so thank you.
Great. Any other discussion on the motion? The only thing I would observe is I think in some rough calculations using satellite imagery, which is now as accurate, it appears that a couple of properties along that stretch who are currently not in conformance with our setback requirements for the homes themselves would come close to, if not into compliance with
Yeah.
that through this action, which is not a bad thing to do either. So
Right.
all in all, a good effort. So we've got the motion before us once again to authorize staff to begin the process to vacate the various properties, various rights-of-way here or easements on this section of South McCarran's as outlined. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously, and that authorization is given. That brings us to our next item under business items, which is item 7C, which is to consider entering into a public professional services agreement with Inspiring Site for strategic planning services. These folks were with us at our last meeting on the 5th to get council approval to initiate the process to enter into the contract. Now we have the contract before us. I'll turn it over to Mr. Trudgeon to introduce the proposed contract and any other items related to it as to strategic planning.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you mentioned, we did talk about this at our last meeting, and the council did direct staff to bring forward a professional services agreement with Inspiring Site to conduct a strategic planning process. And in the intervening time, Assistant City Manager Olson and myself met with the consultant to just go over the scope. I would note that the only scope change from the original proposal, the additional $375 to allow for the consultant to reach out to a newly elected council member during the process to provide some background, get some feedback. So the base cost of this would be $28,875. Also on the 5th, we talked about probably a need to have an optional session for implementation. Once the plan is approved, there is a small chance we could maybe get there in 4 strategic planning sessions, but you want to provide the flexibility. So I'm asking the council to approve the professional service agreement for a cost to not exceed $33,175. That adds $4,300 to that base bid, just in case we do need to use that. So the agreement is in the packet, and we're asking for your approval. Secondarily, and perhaps more importantly for tonight, is we need to talk through some dates. It's kind of hard when we have multiple schedules, and we've been narrowing it down. And I also want to talk about the format a little bit. So I don't know if you want to take some action first and then talk about some of those things, or just.
Why don't we go ahead, first as to the entering into the contract, unless council feels that we can't do that until we settle dates. I'm presuming not. Okay, as to entering into the contract, were there any questions from the council? Councilman McGrath?
When you were mentioning the additional cost to interview a potential council member, is that after the election or before?
It'd be after the election,
Okay.
yeah. So after November 5th.
Otherwise, it would be 3 we'd have
Yeah,
to.
yeah.
All right. Any other questions? Otherwise, is there a motion as to entering into the contract as outlined?
So moved.
Second?
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Strawn, seconded by Councilmember Schroeder to authorize entering into that contract as outlined for the not to exceed 33,175. Discussion on the motion as the maker, Councilmember Strawn.
I appreciate how thorough this proposal is and how delineated it is. It's rare that I've seen a contract with so specific of outcomes and processes, and I appreciate that. And hopefully we'll be able to keep up our end of the planning process.
Right, and as the seconder, Councilmember Schroeder. All right, any other discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. That contract is approved. Now, as to dates and some other process questions, I'll turn it back over to Mr. Trudgeon to guide us through that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as you know, under the scope, there is a department head focus group and a city council focus group first before we kick off, and then there'll be 4 sessions with department heads and city council. The department head group will be able to meet for the focus group on September 10th. We had thrown out a date for the council focus group, and that will not work, so we need to come back and talk about those dates. The same is for the first session of the joint strategic planning. We do, I'm happy to report, have 2 dates that we all can appear to make. That's October 24th, that would be the second session, and November 13th, the third session. And I would just note, if we decide something tonight, I'll follow up with all of you with all these dates again via email. So we also don't have consensus on the 4th meeting, the last date in December. So in reaching out to all of you, it looked like there is potential of September 25th or October 1st being the opportunity for the city council focus group. I know Councilmember Groff hasn't been able to look at a schedule yet, but those were dates I could see from consensus, depending on the time of day, and we should talk about that here in a bit. But so that is a potential for dates. On the first session, I know 4 of you can make October 11th, and the same for the December 18th session. For number 4, it looks like the 4 that did respond could make it. I know that might be an issue for Councilmembers Groff. There is a possibility we can move that session 4 into January, and that would have the new council member be part of that. If the scheduling is going to be too hard in December. So let's back up. So the first focus group, let's see if we can find a day in that. From what I saw, September 25th and or October 1st would work as a date.
Do you have a time?
I do not. Pull something up here.
They said between 3 and 7:30 they have space.
Yeah, so the consultant said between 3 and 7. So it'd be kind of late afternoon into early evening.
That works for me.
I could do that.
Works for me. And I would note the Roseville Business Council is that morning,
Yes.
so it's probably, if we're
Well,
going to attend that.
Yeah.
we have a board meeting at noon.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah,
So later in the day makes sense then.
yeah. Would 3 p.m. good time?
Duration expected?
Before hours. So
Okay.
3 to 7.
And that's for the 25th?
That would be for the 20th.
Isn't this first one 2.5 hours?
I'm sorry, 2.5 hours, yeah. The first.
Thank you.
Yeah, yes, yeah. And that would just be the council, yeah. So that'd be much shorter.
Still 3 p.m.?
Could we do 4?
Do 4?
4 would be better for me as well.
Okay.
Okay.
So 4 to 6:30?
Yep,
Mhm.
that would be best. Mhm.
Okay. Thank you for that. So now we need to talk about the first session. And if we don't want to use October 1st, because that's a pretty quick turnaround, looks like October 11th, I think, once again, depending on the timing. would be the date that most of you appeared to make.
And that would be in the late afternoon again, right?
We can certainly make it late afternoon.
Or, I mean, I'm fine from like 1 o'clock on,
They put in 1 to 5 as their time slot.
yeah.
I'm okay with that.
That's on the 11th.
Yeah,
Can do that.
Friday.
I think that was
Yeah.
fine with me.
I
Everybody
think-
else can do
I
that?
think that can work.
October 11th, 1, 5. Okay?
That's a Friday, all right?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll be motivated to be done.
It'd be pretty fun.
And then the last one, this is going very smooth, so thank you. The December date, the last session we had chosen in December, with probably the goal to kind of have it wrapped up with this council by the end of the year, knowing that it will lead into next year for implementation. I think there is some conflicts with Councilmember Groff
Yeah, I can't make it.
for the duration, so.
Do we want to look at moving that one to January?
That
Oh,
one has-
Councilmember Hutton?
As the one I'm sure is not going to be there in January, I think it makes a lot of sense to include a new council member in that, and that week is going to be, even in those who have said yes, it's just a crazy time of life. So I think there are some good reasons to punt that fourth session to January. Yeah.
Yeah, so if that's the agreement, I can check with the consultant and throw out some more dates, but we have.
And we'll resume, for those who might be on council, we'd be resuming on January 6th.
Yeah. our
So we'd
first-
have
first
meetings
official.
on the 6th and the 13th, but not the 20th for MLK Day.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
We'll probably have one on the 27th. So to recap, the department head group would be on September 10th. The city council focus group would be on September 25th, 4 to 6:30. The session number 1 would be on October 11th, 1 to 5. We have not set the times for the October 24th or the November 13th. And then we are going to move the fourth session until January to TBD date.
Can you give me that date in November again?
November 13th.
You're going to follow up with all these dates?
Yeah, I'll summarize these and send them out to the council. So October 24th and November 13th, and I don't have in front of me what the availability of the consultant, but is later in the afternoon into the early evening best for the council?
On the 13th?
Yep, or the, either both those dates.
October.
What was the second, the 13th or the?
13th or the.
October 24th.
October 24th is session 2. November 13th is session number 3.
Later in the day is better for me on both those days.
Well, I can do it. I guess I'll just have to not go to the RCLLG pumpkin carving event.
Oh, darn. Yeah, on the 24th, I'd have to rework some stuff, but afternoon tends to be better for me than morning.
What's a good time, 3, 4? And we can have some meals provided, so.
If it's 4 hours, we better say 3.
Yeah.
I don't think we want to start at 4.
Yeah. Would 3 o'clock be good for both of those?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. As I said, I will follow up. We might have some flexibility as we get closer if there's something that does come up, but 3 to 7 on those days.
Okay.
Sounds like we have our dates
Okay,
and
well,
times.
I appreciate that. So.
Except for the fourth one.
Yeah, we'll come back on that at some point. So it is the suggestion of the consultant to have a space that is usable and a little bit more compact than the council chambers. We've looked at the Willow Room downstairs, and we can also consider maybe the fireside room over at the Oval if we wanted to do that. But it was suggested that we have a room that's got walls and things that we can use and a little bit more comfortable than the council chambers. So that would be her suggestion, and I would concur. And I just want to run that by the council and make sure you're comfortable. A side issue on that is whether or not you want these to be videotaped. We can accommodate videotaping through our communication staff, and it won't be broadcast live, but we could post it for a later playback. Or not. We still have to take minutes of the meeting. It's a meeting with the council, but I throw that out to all of you for some discussion.
Well, and certainly our rule is that we do broadcast our meetings actually live if we can, I think is how the rule reads. And so we would have to make an exception for this
Sure.
from that perspective. Council thoughts, Councilmember Ratten?
I think it would be really, really hard to record a session like this if there are things going on the walls and people are talking in small groups. And so obviously it needs to be open to the public.
It is open to,
As we would always be required. But I don't know how we can record it in a way that would be meaningful or even accurate to what's actually happening because of the interplay that would be happening in different ways in different parts of the room. If they're looking at putting things on walls and people, you can see people go and put up stickers and stuff, and who are you recording at that point? So
I think
I don't see this as a practical thing to video record.
And there will be probably small breakout groups throughout the
Right.
session too, as people come up and work on issues. So that will report back, of course, but that's gonna be really hard to
But that would be in the minutes. I mean,
Well, I think the minutes only have to say essentially what action was taken.
oh, I
Yeah,
see.
I think it'd be very general.
Wouldn't be any action really, because
Right.
it's strategic planning, so
I
it
see.
it would be very broad, is my expectation of what minutes would be. It's not going to be a transcript of our conversations, because that would even be difficult to
That'd be
do
worse.
just
Yes.
because of the format
Yes.
in itself.
And I would say, even though this is a meeting, or obviously whenever you guys gather, it's a meeting, but it's not a traditional type of meeting. And it's a meeting to allow for creative solutions and thought to come on out. There will eventually be regular public meetings such as this, where there will be consideration of the final product and adoption and ability for folks to weigh in if they would like. This is just the formulation part of it.
Any objection to not having the meetings recorded? It would still be open to the public, of course, and we want to make sure we accommodate that in whatever room or site we're in, for the dozens of people who will be here. Of course,
More
that
than
would just
welcome.
jinx us. Does that make sense? Right? Doesn't seem to be any objection from the council to not record these,
Okay.
right?
Wonderful. I think that is all I need. We narrow down the dates and the times. I will follow up with the council and confirm again with everybody, and we'll go from there.
Just
Great.
confirming, we do not need to be present at the department heads meeting on
No, you
September
do
10th?
not. No,
Okay,
you do
thank
not.
you.
Sorry.
Unless you're a
Didn't make
department
that-
head.
No, but
Yeah, that's for time for the department, and then similarly, the council will just meet with themselves, with the consultants.
Right? Very good. Thank you again, and we look forward to those sessions. And I think it was very appropriately said that we need to hold up our end of the bargain as council in this whole process here. So the pressure's on us. That brings us to our last business item under section 77D, which is to receive the 2025 city manager recommended budget and tax levy. And I'll give the council the option. We are 10 minutes before our normal break time. We could take a break before this item or after.
Let's take a
Before?
take it now.
All right, why don't we take about a 5-minute break, and we'll take this item up after the break. Thank you.
I was poking around down here and all of a sudden I'm like,